Hey, how we doing, sports bettors? Matt here with OddsJam. Let's bet some player props for Sunday Night Football tonight, Eagles versus Packers. So in this video, I am going to be using the OddsJam screen to find these sharp player prop betting picks. And I'm just going to be teaching you how to use the screen to find profitable bets. And in this case, specifically player props, but it works for money lines, totals, spreads, whatever. All you're trying to do is just use the sports books against each other to find mispriced lines, right? The screen shows you every single sports book that is pricing a market, and you're just trying to compare the two to find mispriced lines, right? That's all you're really trying to do. And the sports books that I use to kind of set the line and say, okay, we're trying to find outliers to these sports books is the OddsJam line that you see here and DraftKings. So DraftKings actually does a really good job specifically pricing player props. I don't know if they use their DFS data or whatever, and FanDuel doesn't. I don't know. I don't have the answers there, but what I can say is that DraftKings does a great job with player props. So you can use DraftKings to almost set the market, right? Be like, okay, DraftKings has this, so this is what it should be priced at. So let's see if we can find opposite. Now, obviously, it's not going to be perfect. Just because it's sharper doesn't mean it's going to be correct 100% of the time. Same thing with the OddsJam line. So I only like to fade player props when, or like I guess I should say, I only like to lock in player props when both DraftKings and the OddsJam line agree, which is exactly what is happening here for this Jalen Hurts passing yardage prop. So DraftKings has it at 226.5, roughly even money each way, minus 115 on the over and the under, not favoring a side. Pinnacle also has this player prop, his yardage at 226.5, but they favor the under, right? You see that the under is priced at minus 125. The over is priced at minus 106, favoring this going under. So basically, Pinnacle, the OddsJam line, sharpest line in the world, has this player prop, his Jalen Hurts passing yardage priced at 226.5, but they think that the under is the more likely scenario, so they're going to make that a little bit more expensive to buy. Well, as you can see here, you can get Jalen Hurts' passing yardage prop at 228.5, so 2 yards higher than that, at roughly even money, at minus 113 on FanDuel. So this is exactly what I mean about using the sports books to take advantage of each other to find mispriced lines. Like Jalen Hurts' passing yardage prop should be priced probably closer to 226.5, but the more likely scenario is that it's going to go under that number. Well, how about we get a player prop, we bet it at 2 yards higher, so we give ourselves a little bit more cushion and still bet that to go under. So I know 2 yards isn't exactly the biggest difference when it's between like 226 and 228.5, but you'd be surprised how often the player prop yardage lands within a yard of what these books have it priced at. So if it lands at 226, if it lands at 227, if it lands at 228, we still win our under 228.5 FanDuel bet, and we would have lost every bet placed on DraftKings except for if it was exactly 226. And then like we see other sports books like BetMGM has it down at 224. That's not a horrible over to take, although I would probably sit that out. I don't think it's worth middling only 4 yards. I like to middle when the yardage is a little bit, when there's a bigger gap. But we see like WinBet and PointsBet priced at 225. We see the DFS books like Prize Picks, Thrive, and Underdog price it at 225, 226.5 as well. Like this column here, these two are Prize Picks. This is Thrive. These two are Underdog. 225, 226. So no DFS play here on the Jalen Hurts one. But there is a DFS play on Aaron Rodgers passing yards, taking him to go under 224.5. So take him under 224.5 on Prize Picks and Underdog. Because as you can see, the OddsJam line prices it at 223, so a yard lower. But they favor the under even more than the Jalen Hurts one. They have the under priced at minus 131, the over priced at minus 101, favoring the under. DraftKings has it at 223.5 as well. And none of the actual sports books price this at 224, only the DFS platforms. So this is probably a mispriced line by Prize Picks and Underdog. So I think that this is a good under to take. Now, obviously, you need to combine it with something. So I'm going to go through the OddsJam screen here, looking at different player props and seeing if there's another good play to have. But I do think if you're just looking for a DFS play, take the Aaron Rodgers under. So now let's look at rushing yards. I found a couple there that I liked as well. If I could find player rushing yards right here. So we want to scroll down to the Eagles and Commanders game, or the Eagles and Packers game. And all right, so one player, this is a straight up bet that I think is really good. A.J. Dillon to go under 35.5 rushing yards. OddsJam prices this 6 yards lower at 229.5, as does, so DraftKings doesn't have a price for A.J. Dillon for whatever reason, but every other book has it at like, we see 30, we see 29, 29, 29, 29. PointsBet has this wildly mispriced at 35.5. So you're paying for it at minus 130. But I think that this is a really good play. So I would actually recommend putting a full unit on this one, on A.J. Dillon under 35.5 rushing yards. And again, just look across the board. The OddsJam line, Pinnacle, has it 6 yards lower. Now, this would be a good middle opportunity. If you want to take A.J. Dillon over 29.5 at minus 110, it's probably a pretty good price, right? We see the books that do price it at 29 heavily favor it going over. So if you want to middle that, I think that is a worthy middle, because you have a 6 yards gap between 35.5 and 29.5 where he could land and you could win both. But if you just had to take one, this PointsBet one is the way better value. So I'm only going to lock in this one, PointsBet, but the under 35.5. But if you did want to middle it, you could. And then another player that I do like, and this is another Jalen Hurts prop, is him going under 50.5 rushing yards, minus 135 at PointsBet. So another really good PointsBet play. You could also parlay these two together if you didn't want to sacrifice them, if you didn't want to pay the minus 130, minus 135 odds. But it's a similar logic here, and it's such a good price, like 50.5 at PointsBet. No other book even has it at 49, right? We see 47, 48, which is where most books have it at 48.5. But again, look where it's priced. Pinnacle, 48.5, heavily favoring it going under. Minus 139, the over at plus 105. Heavily favor it going over. Even DraftKings, which we normally see minus 115 each way, is favoring it to go under as well. So we're getting it 2 yards higher than a number that most sportsbooks, including the sharp ones, think it's going to go under, 2 yards lower than that. So this is another really good price. Jalen Hurts, under 50.5 rushing yards, minus 135. And then the last play that I'm going to lock in here is Miles Sanders. And finally, we're taking an over. Over 65.5 rushing yards, again at PointsBet, minus 120 odds. The OddsJam line prices this a yard higher, 66.5, heavily favors it going over again at minus 142, the under at plus 108. This is, I think, the biggest juice we've seen in terms of what they're favoring. In this case, they're favoring the over, and we're getting it a yard lower at 65.5. Also a good prize picks play, taking Miles Sanders to go over 65.5 rushing yards. And then DraftKings also heavily favors it, going over at 66.5. So all in all, I think this one is a really good price. And this one, I mean, I haven't talked about like the actual handicapping because the math is obviously the most important thing. But the Packers have the fourth worst run defense in the entire NFL. Eagles are in need of a good game after one loss 2 weeks ago, one bad game and a win last week, in need of a good game. That probably involves just relying on the run game, their powerful offensive line to just dominate the Packers defensive line. So Miles Sanders over 65.5 rushing yards is my final player prop, my fourth final player prop for today's Sunday Night Football game. I didn't find anything in the receiving yards that I liked, so I'm not going to have a play there, but just the ones that I talked about. So if you are tailing these, comment and let me know. And that's all I got for you guys. So I do appreciate you watching, and have a good one.